Presented here for your consideration, the notion that the ordinary people surrounding you every day, on the street, the bus, at the post office, or the trendy evening venue, are, in fact, far from ordinary. That these men, women, and others form their own splinter groups behind closed doors, and that these micro-societies engage in activities often more obscure than fiction. Welcome to the Sub-Subculture.
Yes, hello, and thank you for joining us on the Sub-Subculture Podcast. I am four-time rejected BAFTA Award host, Andrew.
And I'm Joe, unrepentant cat botherer.
I've seen him at it. He does not repent.
Absolutely not. They love it. I did think about announcing myself as a cat pleasurer, but I didn't want that to be misconstrued. Or construed, really.
You looked at their facial expressions and thought, this is more bothering than pleasuring.
Yeah, pretty much.
So today, you might need a caffeinated beverage for this one. We are talking about model railway enthusiasts, are we not?
Verily, we are indeed the very same.
Excellent. Now, there was some confusion, probably mostly on my part, at the start when we were looking into this, and that was between model railways and mini railways, i.e. the tiny ones that you can actually sit on as a person and ride, although it's only about the length of a 2x4. But we're not talking about that. It's like models that you would construct, small things, right?
I think it's both, really. I think one is a subculture within the subculture, but I think they're pretty related. I think we can talk about them both.
They'll cross over. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. If you like having a throbbing steam engine between your legs, you might also like to grip one in your hand as well.
Strap in, listeners. You thought ferries were sexual. Boy, have we got a treat for you.
It wasn't sexual before, but in the last 1 minute and 39 seconds, model railwaying has become sexual.
For the first time.
Yeah. Actually, that leads me on to my first impressions and expectations of model railwaying. Do you want to dive in first?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. So there was a model railway near where we went to Scouts for a while at Pinewood.
A mini railway.
It was a mini railway. It wasn't a model. So you're right. I'm crossing them over already. I'm crossing the streams.
Crossing the tracks.
Fuck me and my nonsense. But my impression would be that, without opening any of the articles and stuff, was that this was the territory of grey-haired men and women with a kind of virginal air in polo shirts, khakis, and inevitably forest green sweatshirts or fleeces, or either. But that's exactly the crowd that springs to mind. And in the case of model railways specifically, I would picture this being set up in an elaborate basement with huge levels of detail of the entirely mundane, e.g., it's a hill with a few trees, a field, and some sheep passing like a single track road. That's what I picture in my head.
And why did you think people did it?
My question was more like, why doesn't anyone build the likes of, this is what a railway would look like in fucking Narnia, or inside an active volcano, or I built a scale model of Snowpiercer, or just stick a giant pair of tits on the front of it. Why do they have to be obsessed with like the tiniest details about a hill?
Of all the things that you could model, why the mundane that you can see every day?
Yeah, so I've worked myself up into a fervor already, but
rolling a couple of minutes and he's already
frothing.
Driven to the brink of apoplectic rage.
I don't understand it. Why aren't there more tits?
This is just a memory of how you used to think about it. It's driven you off the wall. But yeah, if I may add my own, I had similar preconceptions, except I didn't have quite the same image of the people doing it. My image was of, again, elderly, I'd say blokes in boiler suits, dark boiler suits, covered in a bit of grease, the sort of shock of white wispy hair, kind of an engineer with a spanner in hand, and that kind of, garden shed enthusiast.
So you're almost picturing someone going full cosplay and they've gone in boiler suit and grease as if they're making their real sized engine.
No, not cosplay. This is just what those kind of people wear. That they're old school garage tinkerers that are naturally at home in overalls. They're not putting it on as a costume to role play anything. It's just when they're in their shed, that's what they wear because they get covered in grease and it's entirely practical.
You don't want to mess up your nice khakis with grease. You've got to put your overalls on top of your khakis first.
So are we talking about the same thing? Khakis is in chinos or...
Yeah, like khaki shorts, khaki trousers.
Like a smart trouser or more of like a combat trouser?
Like a combat trouser. Like with additional pockets that don't really need to be there.
Right, gotcha. Did you think of these people as kind of upper class or posh in any way?
I don't think I had a class perception of them. Sorry, Mr. I see it in divided social groups. They were just kind of old and virgin-y.
Old and virgin-y. I didn't see these people as...
That's the name of my whiskey brand.
I'd buy it. I didn't think of them as virgin-y. I did think of them as probably almost entirely unaware of women as a concept or pastime. Human.
Women as a pastime.
You know, perfectly... They might have kids, but otherwise completely unaware of women as a thing. But not virginal. Right. Anyway, I think we've covered preconceptions pretty solidly.
Well, I would like to say that in the first thing I opened in my research, and this was a BBC article from April the 8th, 2025, that's named, in fact, I've got it open right now.
Do tell.
Model Railway Enthusiasts Keeping Hobby Alive. Yep. So, first thing I see on the screen when I open this article is exactly my preconception
really
rendered in life. We've got a lady in a green sweatshirt, forest green, of course. Then we've got an old chap. He's bald. He's got a white beard. Forest green zip-up hoodie, the fleecy hoodie. Sorry, no hood. It's a fleece. It's a zip-up fleece. And then the absolute G of them all. There's this little tiny white-haired wispy woman who's got not only the forest green zip-up fleece. She's clearly got the forest green jumper and polo shirt underneath it. She's a triple threat. She's got it all.
The Grand Master.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, they're keeping the hobby alive.
And what does the article say?
I can't read. I don't know. I just look at pictures.
You just like the pictures.
Yeah. No. That they are...
You don't need to read it to be able to hate it, right?
That's been my motto in life. Now, they said that the activity is a diminishing hobby and that the group want to change that by giving people the chance to operate all kind of miniature railways themselves. So that is the ride-on kind and the little scale models. How about that?
They said the hobby's in decline?
They said it was a diminishing hobby, although some people have a different opinion.
I think I'd like to say more about that a bit later on. Or maybe I should say it now. I think later on.
So some of the people in here are describing themselves, a bit like you said, that they were born to make things. They're tinkerers. They've always liked making anything. The kind of people that might have made their own motorboat or old canoe. That's some of the examples given.
Sounds about right. So how did it get started?
How did model railwaying get started? How
long has it been around? I'm glad you asked, Andrew. It started...
Please, Joe. That's a great question, Joe. I don't know. How did it get started?
Started in the early 20th century, i.e. early 1900s, mostly as posh clockwork toys for rich people to spend money on and enjoy. But it became more established in the 1920s to 1950s. And Hornby, who's a big British player, got started. I think they actually existed since around 1901, but they made these commercial model sets that people could buy. And I think a lot of kids, basically every kid in the 1920s to 1950s wanted a model train set. Certainly the little boys, I'm not sure about the little girls so much. And I think this kind of went into the brains of these people. And it's kind of evolved since then into the electronic age. And there's more computer control involved now, if you want. I think you can kind of build it to whatever style you like. And you can even involve a bit of programming or 3D printing. And yeah, it's kind of evolved throughout time.
Okay. So that actually touches upon something that I found in a YouTube video when I was looking for the darker side, which we'll get into. We'll get to the dark side of model trains. So this guy has tagged his video, The Truth About Model Railwaying. It's an American guy. He unfortunately did not have any forest green on. That might be an exclusively British thing. I don't know. Maybe there's a patriotism thing there. It was a blue polo he was wearing. I made a note of it. That's right. I wrote down his clothing.
I like that you're really focusing on the important stuff here.
Yeah. I've got 3 pages of notebooks and it's just what people were wearing at the time I saw them. This guy was called DIY and Digital Railroading, but he's on 75.4 thousand subscribers, so declining hobby.
Quite a few subscribers.
It is, but his point hit the nail on the head, I think, which aligns with what you've just been saying about the history. And he said that it's not every kid that wants a train set now because toys have changed, which is why it might be a diminishing hobby. But he said, when I was growing up, every kid wanted a train set, and now that toys that you might find in a toy shop, they're not stuffed with an aisle of toy trains because they don't want that anymore. But he still insists that all kids love trains. He says something along the lines of, I've never seen a kid whose face didn't light up when they saw a model.
I think that's probably true. Whether you're a super train enthusiast or just a regular schlub, then there is something really compelling about it, I think. Do you agree with that, or do you have no interest in it at all?
I do find it dull, but if you saw one of these massive exhibits where things are kind of running on an automated line and it's all the electronic lights are going and the scenery's up and running, you might have been to one of these kind of things or passed it in some kind of exhibit somewhere. I think this is fairly normal in just our collective unconsciousness. You must have gone past this kind of thing at some point, even if it was in a theme park. You would stop and look at it and go, that's kind of cool.
It really is. The detail that people can get into these dioramas, these little pieces of nostalgia or pieces of history, it's just unbelievable. And there's the amount of time and care and detail that goes into these things. I think you can't help but respect that. And even if you don't know or care about that, I think it's just kind of neat seeing mini versions of stuff. I think we're all into that.
If I need to see any miniature versions, I can just lower my trousers. So it just makes me sad mostly. But maybe we've covered what is it really, or maybe we haven't.
Let's add a bit more. So I think it is building small versions of trains from history generally, although there seem to be a few people that do non-historical or sort of fantasy or fanciful things. So what if there was a train line that went from Kansas to the moon? What would the lunar station look like?
Oh, why didn't I find that? This is exactly what I was looking for. In fact, I bookmarked an article I never went back to about someone that was doing a steampunk thing.
I think it's really cool as well. Slightly different flavour, but the same kind of thing. I don't think it's very common, though. I think the vast majority is historical, and most people strive for some level of historical accuracy and consistency, I think.
Painful levels of detail. And maybe we've discovered or just touched upon the subculture of model trains is fantasy train builds that go to the moon or include dragons.
I think that would be fun. Did you see the biggest set in the world, which is in Germany, in Hamburg? Did you see anything about this?
Nope. I think I saw one of the largest in Europe, which is in Italy.
There's probably quite a few of them around. I can't remember the name of this German one. We'll look it up later. But it's unbelievable. They have 15 kilometers of model track. That's crazy. That's like real railway. And they have a model airport, which I suppose isn't technically model train enthusiasts, but it's similar. It's all part of the same little mini city. They've got versions of Switzerland, of the Grand Canyon, of the fjords in Norway. The airport that they built, I mean, this stuff cost millions. They spent $3.5 million just on the airport. And they've made their own software to run it, and it's 150 square meters, I think. For context, my house is 60 square meters, and this is this model airport is 2.5 times the floor area. It's incredible.
Interesting. I did see there's an article that talks about the pop and rock greats who love model railways, and
Rod Stewart.
Yeah, fucking Rod Stewart.
Elton John.
But Pete Waterman, one of the hit writers in the UK pop scene, was involved in making the world's largest portable or movable railway set. And then Rod Stewart has his Grand Street and Three River City, which is a recreation of like mid-20th century Manhattan and Chicago and stuff like that.
I've seen it. It's very cool. Well, cool for a given value of cool. I'm not sure cool is the right word for this hobby. It's uncool, but that's okay. I think it's really impressive.
And when we're covering sort of what it is, there is some lingo which I didn't really dive into for the guys and girls that are really involved in this. Gauge seems to come up quite a lot. You're aware of gauge. You're a man of engineering and science.
all up in gauge. Gauge is how wide apart the tracks are.
No! Don't give an amateur description like that.
Is that not correct?
It's the measurement between the tracks. It's specific. It's like the inside edge of each track, the distance in between them.
Oh, I'm sorry for my idiot simplification.
Yeah, come on. You need to wave your hands and shout more, then you know you're a real scientist. Or evangelical Christian.
But there are different scales of model, which we haven't talked about. Bigger ones and smaller ones. And I think something that's really interesting here is in the UK, the popular scale is something like 1 to 79, 1 to 70 something. And in most other places, it's 1 to 80 something, so slightly smaller. But they use the same gauge railway. And what I find really funny about this is the real British rail network uses the same gauge railway as Europe, but it has the name is something like functional gauge, which means all of our tunnels are narrower, the platforms are closer, and the trains are generally smaller. So European trains, although they would run on the tracks, wouldn't fit through any of the infrastructure. And I thought it was just a really funny coincidental parallel between the real world and the model world.
I can feel myself drifting off already. I found
it's a very interesting parallel, actually, I think you'll find.
What you might find interesting is, I assure you, Norman, I don't. Feels like a Norman kind of activity.
Mm.
I did hear them mention sizes and gauges and stuff, and it was like an alphabetized system for what size of track you're wearing.
00, OH, Z scale.
You know all the words.
These are things I've read. Don't know if I'm using them correctly.
I was mostly interested in the model railway that I came across that is a pub in Prague that I've not been to. I regret that. But you get your beer served to you on the back of a little train. It like rolls past you and your beers are on it. Or maybe it stops at your table. I'd be up for that kind of models, but otherwise I could walk past it and leave it.
I'd be very worried about putting a very delicate model railway in contact with the general public and the quotient of assholes that reside there. It just gives me anxiety thinking about the hours put into those models, how delicate they are, and then some fucking thug that has no appreciation for it or thinks it's funny to... just don't like that idea at all.
You've actually touched on, if there is a dark side to it, what the dark side of modelling is there a bit. Maybe we'll come back to it.
I like dark side at the end of our...
Spoiler alert, there's no real dark side. There's only the darkness in your life that you let consume you by trains. Or a way to shut out the darkness in your life is to buy a train set.
Retire to the shed.
Don't do tracks on your arms, do tracks in your basement. But why do people like it is a question you asked as well. Why do people do it?
A lot of fun researching this.
What makes a man turn modeler? Lust for power? For gold?
Women?
Or are you just born with a heart full of models?
I don't think it's any of those things. Maybe the heart full of models. But I think different people get different things out of it. So some people like the kind of world building aspect or the kind of living history or nostalgia kind of things. It's sort of a way to remember a bygone time. And there might also be a bit of fantasy here or a bit of wish fulfillment because you can kind of pretend you have a job on the railway or be a station controller. And sometimes they have group sessions that might last several hours where they each play a role in this rail network that's been built and kind of act that out. So there's a role play element to it as well sometimes. But there's also the joy of building a system that functions. I enjoy building a system that functions. I never get tired of that. I think there's people that just like building anything. So I think there's also people that like collecting. There's a kind of collector aspect to it. Certain rare models or rare locomotives can fetch a higher price or be difficult to acquire, and some people enjoy it from that point of view.
I think what you've just mentioned is interesting around stepping back into the past. And maybe it's also a way for people to idealize the past, because a lot of the time things that happened previously or, past decades were a bit shitty. People like to recreate like the golden age of steam, but you don't recreate the millions of people that were dying from influenza at the same time. The station's not covered in corpses. Yeah. So there's an element of like idealized history there. But there was also, if I have a look, there was quite a cute BBC News short, which is on the Association of Model. They all love to be in an association. It's like the Associated Society joined clubs of Lower Great Yarmouth's railway enthusiasts. Point two.
If I was gonna make one, I'd found it as a quango.
What's a quango? Word me up.
I don't know. It's like a disorganized form of government, I think. It tends to come up in African republics.
Okay. I'm gonna speak to my South African contacts and find out.
I think you should probably cut that part.
Nope, leaving it in. So yeah, they have to be in associations. This one was the Association of Model Railway Societies in Scotland, based out of Glasgow, and they were talking about how it took them 5 years to build this scale replica. And you were expecting me to say something fairly exciting now, right? Scale replica that takes 5 years to build. It was of Alloa Station. Like, Alloa's not an exciting place. Alloa's like a suburb of Glasgow, basically.
Oh, wow. 5 years for that. Did it take that long to build the real thing?
Not if you've driven through it recently, you didn't think so. But they did say that it's like, how did you describe it? It's the model railway hobby, but we build model railways and take it to a higher level.
Oh,
sorry. Build model railways and take it to a higher level. That's kind of how he said it.
What's the higher level?
Well, just the level of detail that they had put into it.
This just sounds a little bit elitist.
Elite. Our tracks are better than your tracks.
This isn't your English bastard track. This is a detailed Scottish track. Scotland invented the train, don't you know?
Scotland actually invented oxygen, did you know what? Not a lot of people know that, but actually, if you look back, before we came along, there wasn't any oxygen.
The English stole it, but the Scots actually did invent the train.
If you ever crack an oxygen molecule open, you'll find a saltire on it.
You've touched on something which I came across, which is this kind of idealization of history combined with Britain actually did invent the railway. Robert Louis Stevenson invented the steam locomotive, I think. Was it the rocket? If I remember correctly, learning about that in school. And this all kind of, one of the things I tried to look into was, is this a British thing? Is the model railway enthusiast a British phenomenon? And the short answer is no. It's popular in other places too.
The long answer is no!
The longer answer actually is kind of yes. There's something about railways that is in British culture more deeply than it is most places. There's a kind of combination of a golden era for steam, maybe even a golden era for the British Empire, and it all kind of trains with these symbols of technology and productivity, and they also became synonymous with holidays away and things like that. And so I think British rail was probably at its peak in the 50s, which is when the current main crop of enthusiasts were born growing up. And this is probably why a lot of the nostalgia in reenactments focus on kind of seemingly mundane British bits of life. And it's all just kind of all mixed up together in this fond memories of a time bygone. And I wondered if people ever did reenactments or dioramas of, say, colonial railways like in India, or whether that was considered poor taste. And the answer generally is it's considered poor taste. Or it doesn't seem to have the same nostalgic appeal that railways at home do, or railways in the US.
My historian senses are tingling, and the hair on my arms are raising in your potentially anglicized view of train history there, because I think there's a huge amount of importance on the railways in opening up America from being a cluster of small states that were fought over to huge masses of land that were just given away for no real reason. It wouldn't have been possible to expand that way without the railways. Similarly, you've got things like the Trans-Siberian Express that made navigating the huge impasses of Russia possible for them to rape that country as well, and cart people away, to the horrific war crimes of Central Europe in the middle of the last century, but also the era of the British Raj in India, and also potentially a huge amount of slavery in building those railway lines. But things like the
railways were used to bring goods wealth out of India and troops in. So it has a totally different social connotation there.
Yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily tie it to just golden ages in Britain or being that focused. Yeah, there's not a lot more romantic an image than something like the Orient Express, which was literally a train that went to the mysterious Orient across Europe, right?
That's true, but I don't think those railways, I might be wrong, but I don't think those railways are ingrained in the local culture or the country's culture in the same way it is for the UK populace. I think there's something special about trains for the British people in a way that even in the US where, the frontier was shaped by steam locomotives, and you can look at any Western film and they'll have steam locomotives in it, and there's a definite romance, nostalgia, and golden age of the West in that. But I don't think Americans have grown up with trains in the same way. I think it was the car companies that paid to it in the end because they didn't want to compete with the transport. America's makes a lot of sense as a rail network. It's the perfect way to transfer between cities that isn't driving yourself in a car. That's nuts. But they think they had it all shut down by the car companies. And as a result, most Americans today haven't taken a train anywhere. And it's not in their lived experience the same way as British people.
I think it would have a similar element of romanticism about the expansion of the West. But before then, even Civil War era, the railways were hugely important to the side that could actually get those tracks laid down to move troops from the north to the south and vice versa. And then when the rise of commerce came along into the sort of industrial cities, that things like Chicago, exactly how Rod Stewart's modeled his little thing, that wouldn't have happened without massive rail junctions and stuff. So maybe they've got a different time period, a romanticized connection with the rail, or maybe it's just a bit grittier.
Yeah, I think so. And the people do replicas from the American histories, and people do it from Japan and German trains, and it's not solely British, but I just think there's something special in the British relationship to it.
It does seem to feel like a quintessentially British hobby to have a model railway set, maybe especially like if it's a steam engine.
There is something about it, and it fits with the British shed tinkering boffin archetype as well, I think.
For our international listeners, describe a boffin.
A intelligent, probably bespectacled, wiry-haired old bloke who is into tinkering and building things.
Chemistry, engineering. Is it what we would have called nerds at school as well? If you did well on your homework or you were particularly good at stuff, you would get called a boffin. Remember
That's true. That is true. You've really got to be a bit older to achieve true boffin status, I think.
Do you think so? I've not heard that word for a while.
I think so.
But I think this same kind of cute, very, very short article from the BBC News thing that I was talking about, that they built Alloa Station of all things, the sort of one fat old Scots virgin type, which to me seemed like he was trying to justify the amount of time he presumably spends ignoring his family. Talking about model trains, he said it was the only hobby that he knows where you learn joinery, electrics is what he said, but I think he means electronics. I don't know if one learns electrics, engineering, architectural skill, research, you name it. So
and history and modelling and artistic expression. Yeah, so it's a diverse range of skills that can be employed in it. It's quite impressive.
I mean, these dudes were particularly proud that even the tracks they had handmade because it was more accurate and more reliable than what you could shop by. And the guy after him was saying that you can kind of take yourself into this diorama, this little world, away from your hustle and bustle of what we have as usually rather hectic modern lives. And maybe that comes back to the point of why does a man turn modeler? It's another form of escapism. For a lot of the reasons we just mentioned, there's an idyllic quality about it, but it's also a way to
romance,
to disconnect. Yeah, a romance about the period that you're building. I mean, they weren't building Alloa Station as it is now, complete with jankies. It was more like they had taken a bunch of historic photos from the 50s and tried to accurately recreate it from those.
The romance of a lost era or a bygone age. Did you come across the beaching cuts?
Nope. So enlighten me.
I shall. Great question, Andy. In the 1960s, I think it was the head of British Transport or Minister of Transport, something like that, Dr. Richard Beeching, published this report that suggested rural railways were losing too much money and should be shut down. And they closed 2,300 stations across the UK, which is a staggering number. I wouldn't have even guessed that there were that many total, let alone able to close it down. And they closed off about a third of the rail network. So it's a massive, massive sweeping change, and it isolated many places who have never had a train station since. And I think there's a sort of, if you're a train enthusiast, I think this is a sort of cultural agony moment that's gone down in history as one of the most infamous acts, kind of akin to shutting the mines by Thatcher, where it kind of, that, I wouldn't necessarily say the death knell of British rail, but the golden age, that was the end of it for sure.
But you're talking about the actual rail network that transports human beings, not the modelling, or are you saying that this ties into why people kind of want to recreate a period before that happened?
Yeah, I'm saying that this is why it's a bygone era, and this romance from the past is one of the reasons that it's been lost, I think, because the rail network got massively reduced from what it was, and this kind of idea of having to make money and all this kind of stuff. The modern, obviously people can still be enthusiastic about modern systems, and people even build modern replicas, but I think the Beeching cuts were a nail in the coffin of British rail. Not that it's dead, but that's not the best metaphor. Do you get what I'm kind of saying? What I'm trying to get at? That
the drive to recreate this in model form directly links to an event in their life that happened, that there's the removal of something you can no longer see. The only way to really preserve it or recreate it is through a model.
Exactly.
Okay. I mean, as I mentioned, that I saw an article, the website from an Italian place that they describe themselves as a learning museum and an immersive experience. Trust the Italians to go overboard on their self-descriptions, right? This is the best thing you will ever see in your life. You will immediately orgasm when you will look at it.
They do say that.
That is, any time I've had this conversation with Italian, first thing they say, that I'm immediately going to have an orgasm over what they're about to tell me.
And then you tell them that you put chicken on pizza and they implode on the spot.
Lucky for me, I work with a lot of Italians. Satisfied in my job. Yeah, don't mention pineapple. They'll go fucking bananas.
You put the banana on the pizza? I kill you.
South Africans put banana on a pizza.
Oh, they shouldn't even have pizza in the first place.
I got those two into a room and it was absolute chaos.
Ooh.
Fucking pandemonium, mate. Anyway, I've gone off topic. This mini train museum in Florence, which claims to be like the second largest in Europe, and it mentions a few of the factors that I think you've touched upon there. That these are realistic models, they're complex setups, and it involves time and skill to put them together, which is probably part of the appeal. I think it's the satisfaction of a job well done is part of it.
I think it can have almost a meditative quality to it, from what I've read. Getting absorbed in the detail and the kind of slow process. It's not an instant gratification. It's not browsing on TikTok for that instant dopamine hit. This is something that has to be worked at to yield the rewards.
I wouldn't understand that there's any gratification to be had from browsing on TikTok.
Well, you know what I mean, like a sort of exploitation of a brain mechanism, which is why people waste their lives on this stuff. Myself included to a degree.
Oh, I might have an outsider's perspective on it. That's nice. We'll get into that later. That's a side quest.
Your misanthropy saving you here.
If by misanthropy you mean total cultural ignorance, then yeah. Yep.
Virtually, yeah. Ignorance is strength.
You mentioned Rod Stewart earlier on and his modelling. You've mentioned there the level of detail and stuff, and that made me think of the fact that what I read in more than one article, i.e. 2, is that mathematically I'm correct, is that he's such a big enthusiast of model trains that he always gets a second hotel room wherever he goes somewhere for his train modelling stuff.
He brings it with him. I suppose if he's on tour for the whole time.
He works on track. He does the model trees. He wants to recreate all these bits and pieces himself.
Wow. He's probably got a guy whose job it is to bring all that stuff. I mean, if you're on tour 200 days of the year and you want to do your hobby, which is notoriously time-consuming, then it kind of makes sense.
I would imagine that he would have a lot more spare time these days for that hobby. I mean, who's going to see Rod Stewart in concert nowadays?
Yeah. Actually, I was a little bit surprised. Like, is he still going? Go in your shed, mate. You don't need the money. Yeah. Just go enjoy the trains.
You've had that haircut for long enough. It's time to retire.
It's historically accurate. for the era that he's reproducing. Maybe. No, he likes the Old West, doesn't he?
Well, he's got the Chicago one, so I think he's got that kind of American romanticism going on as well. So going back to my preconception of the forest green jumper wearing crew, I did find articles in thepeoplesfriend.co.uk. That's right. And the first thing I saw there was an old man in a forest green knitted jumper.
What is it with you and forest green?
What is it with these people? That's what they're wearing. It's synonymous with the railway. The Flying Scotsman was in a forest green colour, was it not?
Oh, true.
The Jaguar, it's like a Jaguar green, is known as
British racing green.
Land Rovers as well.
That's true. We do like a dark green.
I'm telling you, there's something, it's ingrained culturally. Come back to
RAF aircraft painted dark green on top.
There we go. The stereotype grows. But this article was talking about celebrity model railway enthusiasts, and I like the fact that they said, there's many of them. There's so many celebrity model railway enthusiasts, and they didn't list more than 5. And they were all old and all boring. But this Guardian article I found did have more. So there was Pete Waterman that I mentioned previously, who was the forest green jumper wearing.
What's his claim to fame? I know his name.
He did a lot of songwriting for like 80s, 90s, 70s pop groups.
Oh, okay. Not a musician, not a famous musician himself, but kind of behind the scenes character.
A hit maker, yeah, for sure.
Kingmaker.
Frank Sinatra apparently owned a $1 million setup of model trains.
Wow.
Of his native Hoboken in New Jersey.
Mm-hmm.
There is Neil Young is listed here. Elton John, you've mentioned already.
Mm-hmm.
Broadcaster Anne Diamond, one of the few famous female modelers.
It does overwhelmingly seem to be men that are into this.
Does seem to be a bit of a sausage fest. This article, though, it did amuse me somewhat, apart from the pictures, of course, because as I said, I can't read.
You can read.
As well as having they just got some hilarious virtue signaling quotes from some of these people, like really trying to counterpoint that we've just made, that it says, we see far more non-white faces at the exhibits now.
Really? I think there's no reason why it should be a white thing. It just seems like a white thing.
I'll tell you why, disposable income. They also said, some of the best modelers in the UK are women now. And there are LGBT and transgender modelers. Like they have to hold it up. Like,
please don't cancel us. Don't come for us. We've got one. Look, there he is.
Yeah, and exactly that. There's front and center picture of Eddie Izzard.
Is Eddie Izzard into this?
Well, there's a picture of him/her somewhere near a model train, so that's
okay.
That's proof enough.
That seems like his wheelhouse, to be honest.
Michael Jordan, though, apparently. Michael Jordan, only high-profile black celebrity that is into modeling. Famously black.
I'm sure this is mostly a white hobby. Not that it should stay that way, but I wonder if it's over-egging the diversity of it just to modernize the look.
Well, I think we're veering into like who does this, and that's quite correct that we've identified that is an aging crowd, I would guess.
It is an aging crowd. That's something people have noted about the hobby. And I think that's kind of because the people who are in their 70s and 80s now, who are kind of the stalwarts of this, they grew up in that golden age of rail, and it means something to them in a way that is less common now in the younger generation. But what you mentioned about famous people leads us on to kind of the younger generation and the internet generation. Did you come across a guy called Francis Bourgeois, which is a great name? It's not his real name, but it's a great name.
I didn't, but if I had to put my hand up for a previous talking point, I would say that I think there's a generational shift, exactly for the reason that you said, in that there are an age that grew up with railways, but they also grew up with model railways. And as an accessible toy that was one of the 6 toys that you could get that wasn't a wooden duck nailed together by your granddad. A wooden duck on a string, or a sword made out of a broom handle / a breeze block. And I think this ties in to what they've said is a change in model railwaying as a hobby, in that they've said it's now, I'm quoting from this DIY and Digital Railroad guy that I mentioned before, that he says model railwaying is now a hobby of nuance. And so it's this striving for additional detail and this collector instinct that you mentioned as well. That all comes with an increase in cost, right? So the modeling is now more a place of people with greater disposable incomes, maybe, because sets are becoming pricier and more detailed, which I think it all kind of shifts together with the audience is changing, therefore what we offer is growing and we're expanding, and these things become more expensive to become better. And it was all wrapped up.
They say you need time, space, and money to do this. And I wonder if actually space is the limiting factor for the younger generation, because most of us don't have a spare room lying around that we can just dedicate to a model railway or a shed.
This
of
lack
the younger
of
generation.
home. Yeah, there's the struggle to buy your own place, or the lack of home ownership means that you don't have a garden shed to potter about in the first place.
Yeah.
So
where would you even do it for most people?
He also mentioned a few other things like the closing of brick and mortar hobby stores as stuff goes online means that it's not as visual and it's not as accessible. Even massive stores like Toys R Us apparently have closed down. Is that a thing? I didn't know that.
I think, haven't they been closed down for about 15 years? You really are, right? Insulated.
But he did say that he thinks that we're entering in a second golden age of model trains, partly because of the internet. So if everything moves in peaks and troughs, like we see in history, it kind of does, is that, yes, the physical stores you could go into are fewer, and kids want different toys now, and there's many more distractions and flashy lights for their attention. But there's also been this surge in cheaper manufacturing from China and India, where they can make more detailed things for less money. And it's getting spread more easily through social media, which I think is coming on to exactly what you were talking about. So while some parts of the hobby have died out and maybe the older crowd dominate it in how expensive it can be to get started, actually it's coming back around again, and trending on TikTok is actually now going to drive people back into this hobby.
I think so. And judging by the creators I've seen on YouTube making content for this hobby, it's mostly younger people. I suspect the kind of person that who's older and into model railways, whilst intelligent and engineering focused, are very likely the kind of people that have got no interest in computers, or especially not social media. So there's a kind of gap between them and the younger generation, which maybe those guys are filling in a bit now. To go back to this guy, Francis Bourgeois, he's become a kind of bordering on mainstream celebrity, and he is really interested in train spotting, which is a related but distinct hobby, and model railways. And he is a hardcore anorak. And I think that's...
Anorak being I don't know if it's specifically British, but it's what you would call someone who is interested in standing at a station in the rain, in their anorak, watching trains go past and go, oh, that's the number 47. Unusual to have a diesel on this line at this time of day.
He even sounds like that. His voice even sounds like the typical anorak train spotter voice. So he's a walking stereotype in some ways, but there's something about him and his videos and his raw enthusiasm and genuine passion that people really seem to respond to. I'm kind of stunned by this. I would never have pegged him as a kind of person to get a big following. I suppose if they're all enthusiasts, but even normies seem to enjoy this guy. I don't know, there is something kind of wholesome about him. There is also something wholesome about this hobby, but he's become quite popular on YouTube, and he's become so popular that he's even started modeling for Gucci. Make that make sense.
As in, he's creating models for
No.
Gucci?
No.
Or he is the one wearing Gucci clothes?
He is the face of Gucci, wearing Gucci clothes at Gucci's behest.
That's interesting.
Isn't that wild?
That is fucking wild. To this TikTok generation, there is a whole bunch of stuff that you wouldn't think was something that would get thrown into the popular limelight, like organizing your fridge into Tupperware boxes is somehow satisfying, and there's a whole sub-trend on that, like organizational skills.
Man, I sometimes feel like I don't know human race at all. Like, who are these people?
Think how I feel. I didn't even know fucking Pedos R Us is closed.
Yeah, this must be 10 times worse for you. Everything's a total fucking mystery.
Emerge from my alcoholic's hyper slumber to make one of these. Find out
Fucking
things have changed.
Fucking weirdos, why are they into this shit?
And why does everyone look like a bright cockroach these days? Andrew, there was a nuclear apocalypse about 2 weeks ago.
Sad and gay. That's what I think of that.
Lame.
Okay,
Anyway.
Andrew, but back to bed. Have another beer. Off you go. We'll wheel you out next week. So yeah, Francis, interesting bloke.
Do you think that in your discovery of Francis, who gives a fuck, and his...
Do you hate these guys?
Just a vile human. And his social media empire.
Mm-hmm.
Did you come across any of the kind of stigma attached to model trains or model railways that we might, if we thought about back to our British schoolchild upbringing, I think that we wouldn't have necessarily wanted to say, like, I'm really into trains, or come and see my train set, guys. There would be a stigma attached to it, right? Did you come across any of that, like, currently?
Yeah, it still has a stigma. And I looked up Francis's Wikipedia page, and whilst he'd been enthusiastic about trains since he was about 4, he kind of quietly dropped the hobby during his teenage years for exactly these reasons. It's an easy target for bullying or just people giving you shit. To be honest, if I had been known as a model railway enthusiast at school, if I'd announced that, I would fully expect to fight people on a regular basis afterwards, just because it's just something people can needle you for.
But you're hardcore. You would have crafted those trains into a set of makeshift nunchucks from our kung fu days, and you would have railed them.
I was very impulsive. I hope I wouldn't have blinded anyone with the misplaced or well-placed end of a train track. But yeah, there is a stigma to it, but lots of nerdy stuff kind of has a stigma to it. And I did see a Reddit post of this guy being worried about what people would think of him, and everyone just told him to grow up.
But that's exactly what it is. It's schoolyard stuff, really, to make fun of this kind of hobby. I was on modeltrainforum.com, and I could feel the acne developing on my face as I was reading it. But there was a few posts addressing this kind of stigma from people on there who are, if you're on modeltrainforum.com, you're already in. You're down the rabbit hole, guy.
You're already in too deep, my friend.
Yeah. But their response was more or less like, oh, well, if there's some kids that hang around outside the hobby shop and call me names when I come out, they just don't understand, or they're curious themselves, or they just don't get it. They didn't seem bothered at all.
No, I mean, I don't really know why you would be bothered. This is something you can do in private, pretty much, and engage with as many people as you want or not to. So I don't really. It's not like you're wearing a fursuit and wandering around. That's really asking for comments anyway.
Asking to be screamed at by evangelical Christians who used to be drug dealers.
So yeah, I don't really understand the fear of the stigma about this. Really, it's not exactly a huge stigma, is it? It's just a bit anarchy.
Yeah, exactly. You might just be called nerdy or geeky, which is also coming back into vogue now anyway. So, I mean, if I had to say, like I said, I went looking for the dark side of model trains, and I really couldn't find that there is one. I didn't find that anyone was attaching phalluses to the front of them and running them at full speed towards themselves in any kind of suggestive manner.
So I'm not proud of this, but I specifically looked for model railway porn. I wanted to see if Rule 34 would still apply to this.
Long before we planned to make this episode. I'm not proud of it. I was browsing this for about 2 weeks.
Just gave me the idea for an episode. But okay, I didn't spend a lot of time looking for this. I think partly because I was afraid I might find it, but on a cursory glance, this does not seem to be a subgenre of porn. Thank God. Something is still pure in this universe. And I got no whiff of it and no evidence for it that there's anything sexual about any of it. It's totally operating in a different plane. It's not a continuum in any way. Is this what you found?
Thank you, forest green wearing virgins. You've kept something at least wholesome in this world.
Yeah. This is the is it sexual segment, and definitively no, not even slightly.
I agree. The only person that's made it sexual is me in the last 57 minutes.
Sorry,
even you haven't managed to.
No, I tried.
I've just screamed "put tits on it" about 3 times.
Also, if anyone's listening and can happen to prove me wrong about model railway pornography,
keep it to your fucking self. Just don't send us the links. I don't want to.
Don't tell me. Don't comment. Keep it to yourself.
I don't want to get the link for hornyforhornby.com to my fucking email address.
I hope that's not a real website.
If your favorite phallus happens to be shaped like a train, that's fine. Just keep it to yourself. No, the only dark side of model trains that I found with some sort of people trying to make clickbaity kind of thumbnails for their YouTube channels titled in capital letters, "The Bad Side of Model Railways." All I could really see was that a few newspaper articles from the UK. I did only come across ones from the BBC where people who had kind of extensive collections of these things had them stolen and were saying,
"Oh my God."
I found
of all the things to steal,
I found at least 3 of them from the last 15 years or so, where they were saying like £10,000 worth of model trail sets stolen. That's on 2 separate occasions.
But it's £10,000 worth to buy, not £10,000 worth to sell. Surely, no one even. There's specific advice I saw saying don't buy secondhand tracks. You don't know what it's been through. Can you imagine trying to fence a model railway? Who the fuck are you going to sell it to?
But this is the collector side thing. Like, if someone had a Flying Scotsman...
But you'd have to be in the hobby to know that.
Yeah, well, yeah. It was an insider crime, maybe.
Darren the chav that's got no concept of anything.
Actually, one of them was this kindly old man who let some gross-looking female stay in his house because she'd fallen on hard times. Must have mentioned to her or shown her his spare room full of trains, probably hoping it would give her the old Hornby. And she then later came back with some dodgy-looking boyfriend and stole all his stuff.
Wow, what a piece of shit. No good deed goes unpunished.
And there was some museum or a small exhibit that had £30,000 worth of railway stolen. I mean, it's amazing that people have got that much. But who values it exactly? It might have been that much to buy in the first place. That's like when I go on holiday and I claim that my suitcase was full of gold bars when I lose it in the airport.
I always travel with gold bullion. You can't prove I don't have it.
Yeah. Show me the photos of me not holding gold bars.
So...
Oh, wait, all of them.
Pretty much, as you said at the beginning, most of the dark sides I could find were really just kind of normal human things like loneliness. It can be an invitation to spend time shut up in your shed away from people. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it can be. This is probably the most prominent dark side I found to it was gatekeeping. People can be quite dogmatic about what's the right way to do certain things, or be very specific about anachronistic stuff, things that aren't in the right time context for the rest of the scene, or inaccurate model, or some locomotive that's stuck to the wrong rolling stock. And you get that kind of thing with every hobby, I guess.
Elitism in the
elitism and gatekeeping, yeah.
So the only ones I came across when I said it exactly as I said, the bad side of model railways, and I opened that one because I wanted to see what this guy had to say. Like, did he tell me that a model railway broke into his house and killed his dog or something? I was waiting for John Wick. I was waiting for that, but based around trains, but it wasn't. So
they can apparently have long simmering tensions based on gauge size and digital versus analog and all this kind of stuff.
Someone strangled the club president with his own length of age gauge.
Clubs have split over differences like this. I think sometimes it comes from a resistance to modernizing as well. That's kind of the point in some ways, I suppose.
That's henpecking and any kind of hobby feuds. There's always going to be I think.
Yes, but it's just occurred to me that a refusal to modernize is almost a core principle of a lot of the model railway. And that's the whole point. It's a piece of history from a certain time. So I can understand why you wouldn't want to have Bluetooth-enabled trees or whatever else you're sticking to it.
But you could also point out that you're running an electric system to recreate a steam engine. Like,
I bet that hacks people off.
If you were going to be faithful to the original, you would build a 172nd size model of a coal burner and hack that piece of coal that is very hard to buy in the first place down to the size of not even your thumbnail, and then feed it into it.
This is also true.
No, but this guy, he was called, let's name your sources, plug them for what he is, Iron Horse Railway. It's a strong name, a man's name. But when I opened up his video, I was greeted with a flat cap, twit-bearded Yorkshireman. But still, he's got 3.78 thousand subscribers, so good for him. He's also got a proud sponsorship from his local hobby shop in Leigh, so good for him. He's keeping the dream alive. But he's named this video in such a way that you want to click on it and see, like, oh God, they burst into fire and kill your entire family or something. And he starts off by saying, I don't think I like model trains anymore. But all he is really doing is basically moaning that they're an absolute fucking ball ache to maintain them, because it's a lot of detail and a lot of effort. And as we said, you have to learn a lot of skills to to build these things and or you can do. You don't have to. I guess you can buy a set out of a box and build it and be absolutely fine. But he goes into quite a lot of detail about how your track can lift or bow, or you can have mechanical failures like dry solder joints, Joe. Dry solder joints. These things. It was really sweet in a way, because he was like, oh, sometimes you just want to come home and you just want to unwind by running your trains. And it's so fucking fiddly. And you got to run it and you find that just your track, for no explicable reason, is like that. It's bored. And I was like,
that would be frustrating.
If these are the worst problems you've got, maybe it's actually quite a good thing.
I think you've got to really enjoy the tinkering, the painstaking effort, the huge amounts of time and detail orientation that has to go into this. Otherwise, it's probably not the hobby for you.
Really, I didn't come across a properly good explanation of why there is such a fascination with the attention to detail on these things. But I've got my own ideas around that, I guess.
What are your ideas?
I'll leave it for my closing remarks, thank you.
Oh, okay.
That's very good, thank you.
No spoilers. One thing I thought was kind of sad about this is when people die and they leave behind massive layouts that nobody knows what to do with. That's kind of sad. Someone has to dismantle all of, potentially a lifetime's work in an afternoon to take it to the tip or hawk it on eBay to people that have been advised to not buy secondhand stuff.
Well, I would say that people that have been advised not to buy secondhand stuff are falling into the trap of big model railways,
Yeah, true.
Buy it new.
I'm sure secondhand stuff's fine if you apply a bit of judgment. Stacey, with the confidence of a man that knows very little about this hobby.
3/4 of an hour's of research, thank you very much.
Next difficult topic. Let me cut straight through it.
Maybe that's just any kind of collection or any kind of built-up work. It's almost like finding someone's home-built house in a forest years later after they've died. It really, mostly what it's doing is bringing home the reality of entropy, in that nothing is forever, and that someone's life work has ultimately meant nothing to the next person or on the grander scheme of time. There's a fucking bleak idea for you.
Dust thou came from and dust thou shall return.
Yeah. So I guess it is sad that you would have to be faced with that as a staring reminder that someone built this and spent time on it and is no longer here anymore. But maybe everything's kind of a bit like that.
The final darker side of it is it kind of blends for some people into hoarding and a kind of financial sinkhole. But I mean, that's not exactly a dark side. That's just it's a byproduct of someone that was going to do that anyway. Basically, in conclusion of the dark sides, nothing that isn't just normal human existence, really, and humans being humans. There's nothing. Overall, I think it's a remarkably clean. Pure was maybe not the right word, but a remarkably wholesome pastime.
I would agree. I didn't find anything that would counter that. The things that you could see as negative about it, the expense of it, the hoarding, are all maybe just parts of a human nature that would come out anyway. If it wasn't that, it would be something better or worse. Pokemon cards.
Yeah, people do that. I once made a kid give me his Zapdos in return for 3 bits of Yorkie. He promised me a Raichu if I gave him 3 bits of Yorkie. And I said, all right, that's a great deal. And he didn't have it, and I kept pressing him, because a deal's a deal, motherfucker. You said. And he eventually produced his Zapdos. And I almost felt bad taking it off him, because I was like, you should never have promised this, man. This is worth like 15 quid. And that Yorkie was 30p back in day.
I think I gave a girl a Zapdos on the park bench once.
Did you fancy her?
I saw a Pikachu and everything.
Yeah, cut that as well.
That's staying in. All of it's staying in.
So going back to the mini railways a little bit, I was interested in the distinction there, because they tend to actually be genuinely steam powered. So these mini sit-upon railways are maybe, I don't know, 1 foot high and 6 feet long, and 7¼ inch gauge track, as I recall. And there was one in, as we talked about, next to the Scout Hut, which went all through the forest. And I think I rode on it once. It was very cool. As a kid, it was an awesome little journey. But what I thought was interesting was why this distinction. And the consensus I found was that people that are more interested in the engineering side of it and less in the historical side like to make the mini steam engines, and on a slightly bigger scale, the steam engines will work and it was that kind of engineering appeal to it to make something a bit more functional. But the irony of it being, of course, that it's still, for most intents and purposes other than entertainment, totally useless because it's still just a model train. So I thought it was an interesting little contradiction.
I think, yeah, that, as I said, they're not mutually exclusive, and you'll find that if there's a big enough club that has a model, a mini train that you can sit on and ride, they'll probably have some capacity for modeling nearby as well. That was one of the things that kind of made me laugh about the model railway enthusiasts keeping the dream alive, whatever I fucking said at the start, was that it talks about their exhibit or their railway reopening, and it specifically calls it out as seasonal. It's like, oh, I wonder what the high season for a little mini ride on steam train is.
It might just mean winter and summer.
But actually, there's one not too far from me here, which is outside a massive shopping centre. So it's in a fairly modern setting, and it's popular, and it's just an attraction for kids. There's a outdoor rock climbing wall nearby. There's some park equipment, and then there's this little mini railway that runs around. I don't think they claim to be steam. I think it's fully electric. But that does seem to be more the interest for the engineers, that is to get this thing up and running is more of the challenge, because if you're building on a scale that someone can sit on it, it's got to be a bit more robust and therefore less delicate, and you probably can't devote the level of detail. You can't have the perfectly historically accurate 1940s building for someone to sit next to and all that kind of stuff.
No, at that point, the building scale would be too big. You'd have to make actual buildings.
Yeah, but I mean, this one is staffed exclusively by surly teenagers, and sometimes you'll see just a very, very bored Czech teenager riding around on an electric train that there's no passengers on. He's obviously just running because that's his job, and by God, he's going to run that train.
I hope they still enjoy it. I suspect most of them do it for just the job, but it is what it is.
I've tried to look deep into their eyes to see if there's a spark of joy left in there, and mostly they just tell me to go away and please stop touching me.
The police have been called again. I think the only other thing I wanted to mention, going back to the Britishness of all this, is, have you ever read Harry Potter? Have you ever heard of Harry Potter?
My alcoholic cryo sleep has been fairly deep, but it's not been deep enough to avoid that. So yes, I've read them all.
You've still been penetrated by Harry Potter.
Whoa there.
Hang on. Hold on. I misspoke.
My experience being ridden by the Hogwarts Express is a whole different topic.
But yeah, that's what I was going to say, is overall, I think Harry Potter is kind of a love letter to Britishness in many different ways. And I think it's not a coincidence that the Hogwarts Express, the steam train, features in there. I think it's part of our cultural identity and cultural heritage. And it's kind of symbolic of transportation from the real world to a magical holiday world, or holiday school magic, which I think echoes a lot of children's railway holidays. That's my theory anyway. So I thought it was a nice thing.
I think you are on the money with that. That sounds pretty fitting. And it's also quite nice that it rolls it forward into generations of people that wouldn't necessarily have thought about trains. Actually, even my younger sister, so bringing her over here to Central Europe, and we've gone somewhere on a trip, and the trains here are different to British trains. And this, of course, their modern trains they're not bullet trains or anything like in Japan, but they're not steam-driven locomotives or anything either. But the layout of the carriages themselves are, you've got a passage up the side, and then from there you go into a compartment with 4 to 6 seats in it. And the first thing she says is, "Oh, it's like the Hogwarts Express," because it's not open carriages. Try and fight your way past a crowd of vomiting pikeys in an unair-conditioned free-for-all to get a seat. There's kind of still that wonder and that mysticism, which reminds her of a fantasy setting, which also harks back to a better time of rail travel.
I must say, there is little romantic appeal in the modern train.
As someone who used to commute between Worcester and Birmingham for 40-odd minutes a day on the daily, there is nothing at all romantic about that journey.
No, they're fucking bleak, to be honest. They're expensive and bleak, and frequently delayed.
This is a very different old man's podcast, but I could bang on about the price of a season ticket and how often the trains were cancelled, not running, or overcrowded.
That's an outrage. I think one of the tragedies of the beaching cuts is they shut all of the rail to be more economic than they privatised it anyway.
That's okay. You're renationalising now.
I think this is a really good thing. Long may it continue. I hate this in the modern world, that stuff has to make money for it to be allowed.
Don't really know what to say about that.
Just agree with me. That's all I want.
You're right.
Yeah. So, closing remarks. Did you learn anything? Were your preconceptions challenged? And is it something that would interest you?
As I have tried to demonstrate in the scientific fashion from presenting my research alongside my initial hypothesis of the royal green fleece-wearing crew, no preconceptions were challenged. No, that's not entirely true. But my preconceptions of the kind of people that it appeals to, I guess, were largely correct. I was slightly surprised to learn that a younger generation are TikToking about model trains, but then I probably shouldn't be, because there's probably TikToking about anything. But in summary, at least from my side, I think it's still largely driven by a kind of post-dad or post-granddad culture, in that what once might have been done for childish fun and amusement is now difficult to justify in an adult world, and people want to kind of harken back to that when they have a model train set. But for us as adults, and you can see this kind of in the evolution of video game topics and formats, if we really wanted to get super nerdy, but it's difficult for us to find just pure joy in doing something unless it's got rules and a structure and a purpose and a level of complexity. That's what I mean by kind of post-dad. So the traditional marketplace for model trains remains the kind of people that have grown up and now have got a sort of level of disposable income, and they have a relatable way to channel what level of creativity that they have, as well as extracting the joy from a job well done in building something that works and has a degree of accuracy that you can stand back and go, this looks like that thing that I had in mind to start with, and I made that. I made this possible.
Must be satisfying.
I guess it's interesting to know whether this hobby is really having an actual resurgence and a second golden age, and if this sort of nerdiness around it is actually coming back into vogue with the fact that you can now buy things online and it's easier to get things delivered to you.
You can print them, you can laser scan stuff.
Yeah.
You've got more advanced electronics control than ever before. Batteries have never been cheaper.
That's also true. And yeah, more people have access to learn how to do the electronics through things like YouTube channels. So maybe this increased deliverability or accessibility of the components is driving people to go back into it, although I think that the entry point remains relatively high in terms of cost and time and space that you've identified. And that while the internet can fuel people sharing interest in these things and the capacity to buy them, it's not necessarily going to open the door that much for hobbyists in the way that something like Dungeons and Dragons, which was traditionally quite a nerdy pastime, became so much more accessible to more people online through the pandemic, because you have software that can facilitate you doing that for absolutely nothing. If you want to be a model railwayer, you kind of have to buy and build the models.
I think it's 150 quid for a basic Hornby set, which is more or less just a ring and some locomotives. So yeah, I think you could easily spend thousands to get something that looks authentic.
So that was quite a long rambling stream of consciousness in terms of final thoughts.
And would you have any interest in it? Is it something you could see yourself doing?
Maybe the building part of it, possibly. I painted a few miniatures, although they were all fantasy based when I was younger. And I think it would be a bit like trying to assemble a Lego kit now. Part of the fun of that back in the day was that you would build something as you were playing with it and you were kind of creating this grand adventure as you went. Now I think you would want to, or I find myself, maybe it's just me, and my imagination has been crushed and dulled by corporate life, but I would build something for the joy of building it and for completing it and for doing the job, and then step back and go, all right, that's quite nice, but I wouldn't know what to do with it afterwards. I don't think I would have any enjoyment from running the trains. It would be like, okay, cool, what's the next thing we're making?
That makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I would get a huge amount of joy in actually seeing the trains go around. I think for me, the joy would be in making a system, an automated system. And once I've seen that it works, then I kind of need to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, like I'm saying, you wouldn't know what to do with it once it's built.
No. Yeah, I think I've got much more of an understanding of this than I did. My preconceptions were kind of accurate, but they were very limited. I just didn't understand what the appeal was to people. I got no emotional reaction from trains whatsoever for myself. But I understand more now about the nostalgia, the history, maybe trying to recapture a childhood feeling, or as well as the engineering and modeling aspects of it. A lot about it appeals to me. In fact, I like pretty much every part of it. And despite all that, I still would not do it, I don't think. Even if I had the space. I think for me, the crippling factor is the time. I already don't have enough time. I've already got too many hobbies. This could be my sole hobby, and I probably still wouldn't have enough time to do everything I wanted to it. So if I had another 8 days in my week, then maybe I could find time to do it. And I'd get a lot of satisfaction in the whole process, I think. But yeah, not for me. I really, really like pretty much every part of it, but I wouldn't want to go into it myself, I don't think.
You don't want to go on tour and be modeling your own rail, like making trees after you've come off of a 3-hour-long concert, just screaming 60-year-old ladies throwing their underwear at you.
If there's nothing else to do, then I would love it. If you trapped me on an island with a bunch of model train parts and components and said, you're not coming off this island for a year, I'd be perfectly happy. I would love building the most epic railway that I could. But as soon as that plane came, I'd be like, damn, well, bye. And then I'd go.
So yeah, like all the component bits, but it's just too much of a time sink.
Yeah, I don't have the space either. It's just a non-starter for me.
I think this is their only go-to hobby. Live by the rail, die by the rail, Joe.
Nobody leaves.
Like that was, whatever his name was, Iron Horse Railway guy, when he was saying about the bad side of it, and sometimes you just want to come home and run your trains or do a bit of signaling. I was like, do you? Okay. All right. So that's it. Mini railways, model railways. I think we've given it more coverage than it's ever had from people that were under the age of 40.
It's had a good going over.
It has. It's been a nice come down from previous topics.
Yeah, about as different as it gets. Still some similar fantasy and wish fulfillment, I think, but otherwise pretty different. I've really enjoyed researching this. It's been loads of fun, and I've gone on my own little nostalgia trip, and yeah, I think I really understand the appeal now.
This is the hobby for a good cup of tea, I think. Solid set of khakis or overalls.
And other such British institutions, such as the tweed jacket and the elbow patch.
This is not lock the door and open an in-private browsing tab, thankfully, so it's been quite nice to get.
Thank God, yeah. This is some internet history I don't have to be ashamed of for once.
Yeah, my algorithm's going to be absolutely fucked from researching this back-to-back with furries, back-to-back with whatever the hell else we were on before.
ASMR and arm wrestling. It's not going to know what to do with you. Like, yeah. I don't know what this guy likes.
As always, as you said, enjoyed the research, enjoyed the discussion, and looking forward to speaking to you again next time.
Next time.
Thank you for joining us. This has been the Sub-Subculture Podcast. Stay safe out there. Don't stick any model railways where they don't belong.
Keep it clean.
Keep it clean. It's a clean hobby. Don't you mess it up.
Clean as a whistle. A steam whistle.
If you enjoyed today's episode, why not check out some other alternative content from some of our friends?
Welcome to the That's Effin' Weird podcast, where we cover anything weird.
A month later, her foot was found in a retention pond 150 miles away.
Unsettling.
He reinstates a bounty system that was used during the French and Indian War, which is a scalp bounty. So basically, you get paid $134 if you bring back an enemy Native American scalp.
Informative.
The costume that they used for that Bigfoot episode was the same costume in Harry and the Hendersons.
Oh, wow.
Really?
And sometimes funny.
Digging their claws into me would be something that would, I don't know if I could, I think it would hurt. I mean, obviously it would hurt, but I don't know.
This is for survival, though. You got time to think about the pain afterward.
True.
I mean, you're fighting for your life here. Like, yeah, it hurts when I'm just, trying to eat my breakfast and the cat scratches me.
If there's anything you guys want us to cover, be sure to leave us a comment or hit us up on our Discord. But just remember, we don't want stuff that's normal. We want stuff that's effing weird.